Okay, so this is for Mrs. Power's first day of math notes. We are going over some basic algebra and math concepts. So the first one that we want to go over is order of operations, which we hope you already know. And we're going to zoom in a little bit here. Order of operations is, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So we know that anytime we see a parentheses, we want to do any grouping symbols first. That also means if you're on a fraction, this is considered a group even if they don't write it. This is considered a group even if they don't write it. Excuse stands for all the exponents. So if we have an x to the fourth power and they give us the x, that's the part that we'd want to do first. Then the next step would be multiply and divide. We don't care which one they are equal. We do them as they occur from left to right. Okay, and then the last one is add and subtract, and again, they are both equal. We do each one either add or subtract as they happen from left to right. Okay, cool. We've got the first part done. Okay, next big deal is what is the difference between terms and factors? Because often students will ask me, I don't know what they mean when they say terms or factors. So there's kind of a cool trick to this to figure this out. And I want you to imagine that we are doing this problem where x equals 1. And we're just going to follow order of operations and plug it in. Okay, so here we go, plugging it in. We get, find my pen here, we get 2 times 1 plus 14 times 1 squared minus 17 plus 1, and we just learned those should be in a grouping symbol, all over 1 minus 1. Okay, so looking at order of operations, I have some grouping symbol work to do. Right over here after this minus sign, we're going to get 18 over 1, and we've got a minus 1. The next thing we should do is exponents, so 1 squared times 14 is plus 14, so we did an exponent with a multiply. Here's a multiply, so we've done all the multiplies and divides. Oh, wait, here is a divide that we want to do right there, so let's put that one in. It is now divided. Okay, and so we've got all of this to just add up. So this is the step that you can tell is when you're down to the very last step, is your last step adding two things together or is it multiplying and dividing? Since we are adding and subtracting at the end, we call these terms. So this means that we are reducing our answer to reduced terms. Okay? Over here on the next one, again plugging in all the ones, we're going to get 1 plus 7, and again that's in a grouping symbol, so that's going to get done first. This is a grouping symbol, so we're going to also work on this. We're going to have 1 to the third plus a 1 minus a 6 all over 8. So in this case, when I start doing order of operations, I'm going to work on both of these parentheses. So the first one is going to be an 8 in parentheses. The second one I'm going to use exponents first. So that's going to be a 1 plus a 1 minus a 6 all over 8. And continuing on for this one, we're going to get 8 times negative 4 all over 8. So again, last step is to divide. So if my last step is to multiply or divide, then that means these are factors that we're talking about. Okay, so going back to the original statement here, problem number 1, we would have said it had 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Okay, and in the second one over here, we would say it has 1, 2, 3 factors. Okay. So next step is being careful with negative signs. So knowing order of operations, no one gets this part wrong. We all know it's negative 3 times negative 3. This part is a 9. But on this part, people seem to think that the negative always goes with the 3, and that's not really the case. You can see in the second one, they use parentheses to say the negative went with the 3. So if it's not in parentheses, this is really negative 3 squared. And order of operations would be do the exponent part first, that would be a 9, and then you would do a multiply last, which would be the minus sign. So we can see that those are not equal, and it's due to order of operations. Exponents come before multiplying by a negative sign. In the second one, In number 4, we've got a 4 times 4, that's 16, with a negative sign in front, that's negative 16. 3 times 3 is 9 with a negative sign in front. This is negative 25. Okay? All right. So next is combining like terms. So again, this is terms I can tell because they're separated by plus and minus signs. So I want to look for things that are exactly alike after the leading coefficient. So an x to the third can only match up with other x to the thirds. We don't work on, when we're adding things, the x squared in with an x to the third. So I have a 1x to the third and a 6x to the third. They're both positive, so they're going to make a 7x to the third. We only have one x squared, and we only have one single x. So if we're writing our answers distributed to terms, this is what it would look like. If we decided to factor it, see how much we can convert things that are distributed to factored and factored to distributed, we could factor out an x and call this 7x squared minus a single x minus 1, and it's now the factored version. These are both equal. It doesn't matter to us which one you write as long as you pick one. So fully distributed or fully factored, in terms or in factored form. Okay, so for number 6, we are looking at something is missing from number 6. Let's see if I can figure out what it is here. So this part right here was an x to the 4th. Okay, and then we have a plus. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger just to make my life a little bit easier here. Then I have a plus x squared. That's raised to the 3rd power, and then the rest of it looks good. Okay, so for here, we want to remember that there's a multiply right here. There's an add, and there's a divide right here. So order of operations says we should handle the multiplies and the exponent work first. So here's a multiply, here's exponent work. So really, we're going to start with exponent work, which is right here. Okay, so exponent work, remember, this is x squared. That just means it's x times x. And they're now saying that we have 3 of them, so it's like having x times x. Here's another set, here's a 3rd set. How many x's are those multiplied in a row? That is an x to the 6th. Okay, the next one right here, we have 3 x's and a y, and we have 2 sets of them. So that's going to be 3 x's, 2 times in a row is going to be 6 of them, and then I'm also going to have 2 y's. Okay, then back over to this first term right here, we have 2 x's times another 4. So that's going to look like 2 x's that are already separated by a multiply dot, and then we're going to multiply in 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So that is x to the 6th as well. And then at the end here, we also have a divide problem. So we have a minus sign out front. We have a fraction bar, the 15 and the 3 reduced to make a 5 on top, because 15 was on top. The x's are going to reduce. This is 1x over x to the 5th, so just the same way we did here with the 15 and the 3, we can see those are both made out of x's. If I remove an x, I'll have an x to the 4th on the bottom. And then negative exponents, remember, you always want to switch. If they're factored, so they're all being multiplied together, we're going to take this y and move it to the top, and when we do that, it's going to become y to the 1st power. We're going to take this y and move it to the bottom, and we're going to call that one y to the 4th. So there'll be one more reduce here that happens, and that's going to be with the y's. We're going to leave that. We're going to call that one y to the 3rd. So it looks to me like our final answer, oh, look at that. We've even got some combining like terms. We have 2x to the 6th. This is not a like term. It doesn't have all the same exact things after the leading coefficient of 1. So we just repeat what we have. And then this one will be minus 5 over x to the 4th, y to the 3rd. Okay, so on number 7, we're going to practice distributive property. So remember that we are looking at a distributive property to mean that we are finding 6 x minus 1s. So it's the same as looking at, I have an x minus 1 plus another x minus 1 plus another x minus 1. And we're going to do 6 of these in a row, and then we're going to combine like terms. So I have 4, here's our 5th, here's our 6th, plus x minus 1. So how many x's does that turn out to be? Well, that turns out to be 6 x's. So everybody learns the shortcut of drawing these little loopy things, but remember, that's actually what we're doing. Okay, and then how many 1s will I have? Well, they're minus 1, so I'm going to end up with a minus 6. So don't forget to do that distribute to every item in the parentheses. It means we have 6 x's, we also have 6 minus 1s. Then the next thing we have is a big old minus sign, so I'm going to create a set of brackets, and now I have 2 sets of y and 2 sets of minus x's. So that's going to be a 2y minus 2x's. Okay, we're going to distribute this minus sign. If it helps you, put a 1 in front and distribute and multiply. So this is going to be minus 2y, and this is going to be plus 2x, because when I distribute a minus sign, it's going to be a negative times a negative. It's going to turn positive. So these are our termed answers. We have 4 terms. Looks like we have 2 that go together, so we can call this 6x minus 6 minus 2y. Okay, so in the same idea, we're going to do this one a little bit faster here, is we're going to look at just distributing directly without going through all the write-ups. So this is going to give me x squared plus 3x minus brackets, because the minus is outside the group, and I'm going to distribute across xy minus 2, and I have an x times an x, that's an x squared. Okay, so there are my term answers, but again, I want to still do that last distribute sign and then combine like terms. So we're going to move this down here. We're going to have x squared plus 3x minus xy plus 2x squared. And again, we have one like term, the x squared's one. So we're going to have 3x squared plus 3x minus xy. Cool. All right, on to the next one then. Okay, so now we're going to remind you of the right way to plug in numbers. Anytime things get complicated, by that I mean we see a lot more negative numbers and fractions than what we'd like to see. One of the easy ways to handle that is to create parentheses every time you plug in a number. Imagine cutting out a little piece of your paper and putting this in. That's what it should look like. And your brain should help you then kind of put stuff together. Okay, so I have... Alright, so next thing we're going to do is substitution of putting in numbers, and again, this is not a big deal. Most people know how to do this. Just a couple hints is that if you're going to put in a number, especially if it's a negative or a fraction, often putting it in parentheses helps your brain and your eyes kind of remind itself what to do. So in number 9 here, I know that I'm going to plug in, instead of an x, I'm going to plug in a negative 2, so I'm going to write down a 1/2, a negative 2 minus 1, plus, and the y is a 1/4, and then minus z is a negative 1. So notice I just used parentheses wherever there was a letter that had to go in to make it a little bit easier for me to see. So maybe even I'll put a negative 2 right here. Okay, so order of operations, I don't have any exponents. I do have some grouping symbols, so I'm going to work there first. So parentheses first, we're looking at all this, so I'm doing negative 3 plus 1/4, and we have a minus, a negative is a plus 1. So this is multiplying. We don't need common denominator for multiplying. They just need to be fractions. So negative 3 over 2 plus 1/4 plus 1. Common denominator for this is going to be a 4. So let's switch these all into 4s. So we're going to multiply this one by 2. We'll get negative 6. This one already is a 4. And then this one we're going to have to multiply into 4 over 4. So this is negative 1 over 2. So that is my absolute and final answer right there. Let's see. Did I do that right? Negative 1 over 4. Got it. Okay. So next one, we have 1/4. We plug in a z and we get negative 1 minus 1, parentheses, plus y squared is 1/4 squared, minus negative 2. So order of operations, we're going to do parentheses first. That's right here. That's a negative 2 times a 1/4. Then we do exponents. So this is 1/4 times 1/4. So a 1 on top, a 16 on the bottom. So now we're moving up to multiply. So we have negative 2/4 plus 1/16 plus 2. We're going to need a common denominator again here. So common denominator is going to be a 16. So this one needs to be multiplied by 4. So we've got negative 8 plus 1. And this one needs a 32. So plus 32. So this one is negative 7 plus 32 is going to be 25 over 16. Okay, absolute value problems. They are parentheses. First of all, they are grouping symbols. So if there's any math to be done, you do those inside. You don't automatically turn every single number positive. You actually use it as a grouping symbol first.